Hey everybody, so today we had the Cave of Doom quiz, and some people asked me to do a tutorial about the solution to the quiz and also how to get to that solution from the grass and sky generation that we did in the last tutorial. So let me go through that now. So here's our Cave of Doom. We have a black space that's always large enough for craft to fly through, sort of Flappy Bird style. And we have these stalactites on the top that are in a warm color spectrum, pinks and oranges and salmons, and then we have these cool colored stalagmites at the bottom, blues and teals and greens and purples, we've got to, and of course, are varying size, so we've got to solve those problems. So I've created a blank project, and I'm just going to start with grass. Moving to the left, and I'm going to make this direction relative to the scene. It'll become important later on. And clouds, also with movement at 180 degrees relative to the scene. And I'll create a game functions actor. That periodically, using a timer, say a 1 second timer, spawns clouds. Where does it spawn the clouds? It spawns the clouds at the top of the screen, which is the game display size height, and at the right edge of the screen, which is game display size width, and then we'll take it off the right edge of the screen, so game display size width plus some value, say 100 to start with. And this position is going to be relative to the scene. We can copy and paste this actor still within the timer and create some grass at the bottom, which is 0, and see what we get. We should get some clouds at the top, some grass at the bottom. And we've skipped all of the randomization from the tutorial because that's not what we're going for this time. We're going for something different. So the first change we need to make here from basic cloud cover and grassland at the bottom is we want these to be stalactites and stalagmites. And a lot of you rightly solved that problem by rotating 45 degrees. However, and this is not your fault, you did the rotation here in the actor attributes. And unfortunately, and this is not your problem, this is a problem with GameSalad, when you spawn an actor, the direction you put here overrides any rotation that you put into the actor. So I think that's a problem. I see why you folks solved it the way you did. I'll show you why I never bumped into that problem, because I solved it using a change attribute. Change attribute of the grass to a rotation of 45 degrees. The way I helped a number of you solve it, I'll do on the clouds, which was to, in the game functions, spawn the clouds at 45 degrees. More than one way to do it. They both work. Unfortunately, the way that many of you chose to do it was actually a way that didn't work. But you can either spawn it at 45 degrees or use a change attribute to set the rotation to 45 degrees. They both should work exactly the same. And they do. So now we have stalactites and stalagmites. Just so we don't get confused with it later, I'm going to take the color out of this grass, set it back to white, and I'm going to call our clouds top and our grass bottom. So the next thing we want to do is we want to look at our color palette. So here we see that our stalactites hanging from the top are all warm colors: yellow, salmon, orange, different shade of orange. So what we're seeing here is a constant presence of red. Purple has red, yellow has red, orange has red, but varying amounts of green and blue. Yellow has green, purple doesn't. Purple has blue, yellow doesn't. So we could see by looking at these colors that our red is always one, but our green and blue vary. Pretty easy to implement. We open up our top. And we change attribute. We change tops green, and we'll change it to something random. And here's the random formula that I used, because notice there's no dark colors in there. So I said, all right, I'm going to create colors that are in the brighter range, from 0.5 to 1. So I'm going to say random 50 to 100 divided by 100. So if random number generates a 50, 50 divided by 100 is 0.5. If it generates a 60, 60 divided by 100 is 0.6. If it generates a 100, 100 divided by 100 is 1. So it's giving me a range from 0.5 to 1 with 100 gradations in my green and also in my blue. So looking at that, I get that same warm spectrum. I get oranges, I get purples, I get salmons, I get yellows, I get pinks, but there's always the presence of red. And I can take this same thing, I'll put it in a group, call it color, take that whole group, move it over to my bottom, paste it there, and now let's see what the bottom is. I go back to Cave of Doom. Okay, my bottom is cooler. It's blues, lavenders, light blues, purples. So what I'm seeing is always a presence of blue. Blue has blue in it, white has blue in it, purple has blue in it, sea blue has blue in it, but varying amounts of red and green. Okay, great. So I go back, I keep doing that. I go back to my solution here, and I continue to vary the green, and I vary the red, but I leave the blue alone. And let's see if I'm working in the right palette. And indeed I am. I'm getting blues and purples and lavenders. So the next thing I need to deal with is size. And these are squares. So in order to change the size of a square, in order to scale a square, I have to scale both its width and its height by the same amount. If ever the width and the height of a square are scaled at different amounts, you immediately get a rectangle. So if I want to scale two values at the same time, the same amount, that's a perfect use of an attribute. I'll call it square size. And I can change that attribute, square size, to some new random value. Let's call it a random value between 50 and the height of the screen. Game display size, height. And I'll take that value and apply it to the width and the height of my actor simultaneously. And this is why I've created the attribute, so that I can take one number and put it in two places. So my next change attribute is going to be to change the width to square size. I'm going to collapse this color to give ourselves a little bit more room. And I'm also going to change the height to the same value. And so now I should get constant variation in height from low stalagmites to huge stalagmites. Little stalagmites, big stalagmites. Great, and I can take exactly the same structure, I can put it into a group, call it change size, copy it, and bring it over to the top, where I also need to create the attribute, square size, and then paste, and I'm changing the attribute square size, and then setting both the width and the height to this new attribute square size. And we see how our Cave of Doom is coming along. Pretty good. We have big peaks and little peaks, but we're not leaving that consistent gap of black in the middle for our spaceship or Flappy Bird or whatever to fly through. Okay, so how do we deal with that? Well, the one way, and the way in which several of you did it, and it's a perfectly valid solution, is just to be more conservative with our random height. Rather than 50 to game display size height, I could say 50 to game display size height divided by 2. It's not going to go more than halfway across the screen. And I'll change that on the bottom as well. Random 50 to game display size height divided by 2. And this is a perfectly valid solution. There's always going to be black space between the stalactites and the stalagmites. What's a little not great about this is that it's not a challenging game to play. Because these will never reach towards each other more than a certain amount, you can always pretty much stay in the center of the screen and be safe if this were some sort of game where you're flying through. So the solution I took was a little bit different. Instead of determining the height of my stalactites and the height of my stalagmites, I determined the height of my stalagmites and the height of my space. So I'm still determining 2 out of 3 things. I'm just determining a different 2 than a lot of you decided. And this is another illustration of the more than one way to do it principle.